Hi, I'm Christy, and I am a wife, mother, grandma, pastor's wife, and retired nurse, and whatever else seems to need to be done. I don't claim to be an expert on gluten-free diet or sourdough, although I do a lot of baking, so I do have some experience. I'd been given some thought and actually had been asked to write down some information that I have about sourdough. Sourdough, but also just gluten-free. And so that's what I'm here for. As I said, I'm not an expert, but over the years I've learned a few things by experience and by studying. I studied and studied and studied and read everything I could. I have found out lots of things, like not everybody agrees on what's right and wrong on gluten-free or sourdough for that matter. But all that reading and studying might make you an expert in knowledge, but it's totally useless if you don't apply it to your life. So that's what I'm looking at here. Hopefully I can share some things that might be of use to other people. Sorry, I'm not good at going without my notes. For me, it's been a really long process getting to this point. Short version, I was sick for 2 years. Lots of details that I could throw in there, but I won't. During that time, I got all kinds of advice from friends, doctors, all kinds of people. Mostly no good came from that. So I can tell you things like, no, I probably don't have what you have just because you feel nauseous once in a while. No, I don't have cancer. We checked that out. No, I have not had the flu for 2 years. And no, best of all, I am not pregnant. So none of those things made me sick. Finally, I was at my GI doctor's office one day, and he was talking about some more tests, but he said what we might have to do is just go to what's called a FODMAP diet. And I'm thinking, so let's do that instead of doing all these tests, because I already had thousands of dollars of debt paying off for tests that I already had been done. And so when I got home, I decided I'm a nurse. I know a little bit about the human body, and so I started researching, and I read up on FODMAP. That's FODMAP, and I could see where that might be helpful. And I had to wait. It was like 4 weeks to see the doctor again. So I decided to just dive in there and do it. And it did wonders for me. I'm feeling so much better. However, one of the things that I didn't like at first was that it was gluten-free, and I love my breads and that kind of stuff, and so I was disappointed to find out that I was going to have to give up some of that. But because gluten actually, or wheat, barley, and rye have gluten, and those are, main ones that we use in the American diet. And those have what's called oligosaccharides and probably some other FODMAPs too. I'm not entirely sure. But because of that, many people have to beware. There is a ton of information about gluten-free diet and gluten-free foods. Some of it's good information, some of it's not good information. Some of it is subjective, I guess. No two people are alike. What works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for you. So you kind of have to, it's kind of a trial and error thing to some extent. But there are a few things that I have learned. One is gluten-free is inconvenient at times, but it's really not that hard. Once you get the hang of it and really understand it, it's not that difficult. Something else that is very important is that gluten-free diet, people who are sensitive or intolerant of gluten are not the same as celiacs. Gluten-free and celiacs do not, well, actually I should say they do cross over, because gluten isn't an issue for celiacs, but celiacs is way, way worse than being intolerant or sensitive to gluten. Gluten is hidden in a lot of foods at the store, and you have to read labels to make sure what you're getting. I have discovered things that have a little bit of gluten in them. Probably you're going to be okay as long as you don't eat large amounts of them. Soy sauce is an example of that. It has gluten in it, but you know, a sprinkle of soy sauce on your rice is not going to cause you to have a reaction. If you put a tablespoon or two on, that might be enough to make you have troubles. Sourdough is a good option for people with gluten-free problems. Sometimes, usually, most people who have gluten-free problems can have sourdough. The reason is that it's fermented. It's as it does its work, it is breaking down gluten. It doesn't get rid of the gluten, but it breaks it down so that your body can digest it. It does a lot of your work for you, and so it has proven to be a really good thing. You can buy sourdough bread at the store, but you must read the labels. If it says yeast in the ingredients, it's not real sourdough. You need to have one that is proofed for at least 12 to 24 hours, and if they have yeast in it, they didn't do that, because there's just no way it would work. Another note on celiacs: sourdough works great for the rest of us. Celiacs absolutely do not do sourdough without consulting with your doctor first. There are other options. You might be better just to forget it, but definitely do not do it without checking with your doctor. As I said, sourdough has to be proofed 12 to 24 hours depending on the flour, and that's an important issue. Another problem with gluten-free diet is there are all kinds of gluten-free products on the market out there. You can buy, all kinds of breads and cookies and all that kind of stuff. Well, a lot of people with gluten-free problems also have trouble with the gums, like xanthan gum, gar gum, Carrageenan. There's lots, different gums. And those are put in there to hold the products together better, because gluten-free tends to not want to stick together very well when you bake it. But those gums can be just as bad as the gluten for some people. For me, I think it's even worse. And so by doing your own sourdough, you don't have to use gums. I'm a big proponent of sourdough, just in case you're wondering. Most people, I think we talked about it before, if you get just a tiny bit of gluten in something, you don't have to panic. If someone with celiacs gets a candy bar that the bag was dusted with flour, they're going to be in trouble. Gluten-free, intolerant people are not going to even notice the difference, most likely, because there's just not enough there to hurt you. You do have to pay attention if you eat something, say you eat a half a cookie because you forgot it was not gluten-free, and then later in the day you come along and go, oh look, a half a cookie, and you eat that, then you're starting to push it. It's called stacking, when you eat too many things with even though several things have small amounts of gluten, if you eat a whole bunch of different ones, you're still getting a lot of gluten. There are some different kinds of gluten, different forms. Gluten is in corn, for instance, but it's not the kind of gluten that is likely to cause you huge amount of problems in comparison to wheat, barley, and rye. But it is something that you do have to be sensitive to, or sensible about, I guess. And it is sort of medium, at least, on the FODMAP diet. It's, oh gosh, I think you're allowed a tablespoon or something, maybe two. So just know that there are other kinds of gluten out there. Some of them might bother you, some of them may not. One of the things I think that's really important is don't be so overly zealous about this thing that you make it impossible. Because if you make it difficult and really go overboard on it, you're really just setting yourself up to fail. You're not going to be able to stick to it. And so what's really important is to find a balance, find out what things do and don't affect you. It takes some time, but your best bet is to eliminate all that stuff and then just one at a time gradually add that stuff back into your diet and see if it works or not. The thing to keep in mind is it is not a one-size-fits-all. And so you just have to find what works for you, and remember, it's individual. Nobody can come along and say, these are the rules and you have to live by them. Not so. You have to find what works for you. Your needs and your symptoms will vary. So with that said, I'm going to go on in the next little section. I'm going to show you how to make a sourdough starter, and then we will break some bread also.